was by design. Your Constitution itself boxed black folk in. We've been boxed in by the United States Constitution because the original Constitution spelled out specifically how black folk would be treated in this country. You just mentioned something about we come here searching for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. That was not what it was talking about originally in the Constitution. Originally, when Jefferson and Madison wrote the U.S. Constitution, they were talking about life, liberty, and pursuit of property. Because in the Constitution, black folk were defined as property. 3/5 of a human being, equal to a field animal, and you were treated as property. There's nothing in the Constitution that addresses the issues for black folk. We are locked and boxed into the Constitution. And until we go back and address that issue, black folk can never get out of it. And you can't get out of it secondarily, out of this box, because the United States Supreme Court put the lock on the box. The United States Supreme Court right now says, let's go back to the original intent of the Constitution, which says black folks should be 3/5 of a human being, property, and equal to a field animal. That's throughout the Constitution. It's never changed. And the United States Supreme Court then, in the Madison and Marlboro decision of 1803, says that we're going to make sure that we abide by that. And then later on in 1857, in the Dred Scott decision, says black folk have no rights that white folks are bound to respect. The Constitution have you locked and boxed, and the United States Supreme Court can make sure you never get out of that box. That is the most racist organization in America. 57 of the first people appointed to the United States Supreme Court were slave owners, and subsequently most of them have been racist. So you're not going to get out of the box unless you go back and address these issues structurally on behalf of black folk.
I like to think that I'm a relatively aware and conscientious individual. I kind of have to be trying to do what I do. But I've read a couple of your highly illuminating, informative books. This one here is Black Labor, White Wealth, The Search for Power and Economic Justice. And you have an appendix in this book that sort of blew my mind as I was reading down it. And it's titled Boundary Safeguards and Restrictions in Southern States. And you mentioned many things, like in 1619, the Maryland segregation policy, which we're right here on the doorstep of Maryland, recommended that blacks be socially included, and so many other things in this particular appendix here. But when I got down to the year 1775, there was something called the Virginia Runaway Law that allowed the sale or execution of slaves attempting to flee slavery. And I thought that I would bring this up in this discussion because oftentimes there are people who say, oh my God, why are you still talking about slavery? And I think that in 2015, there is, for the most part, a wholesale lack of appreciation for the impact that slavery, for the hundreds of years that it was practiced, has on today's world.
Right. And see, black folk are still under the impact of 360 years of slavery and another 100 years of Jim Crow semi-slavery.
I didn't hear the first part you said.
That they're still being burdened, they're overburdened by slavery because no one has addressed the negative impact of slavery on black folk. It's never been addressed. Because what was the purpose of slavery? The purpose of slavery was to systematically, socially engineer black folk into the lowest level of a real-life monopoly game that was based on wealth, power, and control, what you own and control. And slavery itself then maldistributed almost 100% of all this nation's wealth, power, resource, privileges, and controls of all levels of government into the hands of the dominant white society. And black folk don't have enough resources to be a competitive group. When black folk came out of slavery, let's say before they even went into slavery, they owned and controlled nothing. When they came out in the 1860s, a few blacks, about 250,000 black folk, had successfully acquired 1/2 of 1% of this nation's wealth. And that was in 1860, Rock. Here you are 150 years later, black folks still own and control 1/2 of 1% of this nation's wealth. And it's wealth that controls what you get, what your opportunity is going to be. And that 1/2 of 1%, what does it equate to today? That means that the typical white person right now has 3,500 times more wealth than black folk.
Dr. Anderson, I would like to start this discussion and try to frame it for those who know you and for those viewers who may not know you. Oftentimes, when proponents of black equality and liberation express strong views, they may be telling a strong and accurate truth, but they get criticized, you get criticized for talking that black stuff, and the sense that when you talk about black empowerment, you are in some way discriminating against white people or others. How do you address that?
Well, very simply, Rock, first of all, let them know that every group on this earth understands that you're in a team relationship. Racism is a team sport. It came into existence as a team. You play as a team or you lose by default. And only with black folk do people get upset when black folks start talking about coming together and uniting and working together and cooperating together, buying from each other and supporting each other. You know why? For a simple reason that everybody understands. When you come together and unify, that signifies strength. And right now, everybody right now is pimping and hustling black folk. They've been pimping and hustling black folk for 400 or 500 years. We spend approximately 97% to 98% of all our money outside of our own community, as an example. And we don't practice group economics, we don't practice group politics. All that makes, when we spend 98% of all our money outside of our community, what that does, it makes the other groups enriched. They now are living off of two incomes. They live off of 100% of their money and 98% of our money. And what are we left with is 2%, where everybody else is living off of 198% of everything. We live off of 2%, which makes it impossible. And so you start talking about unifying black folk, that's a threat. They're saying, you're gonna cut off your money from us? You're gonna cut off, we're living off of two incomes. You're gonna reduce us down to one income? That's a threat to them. Also, it's a threat when you start talking about unifying blacks and looking out for your own people. That means political possibility of uniting as a political force in this country, which nobody wants to see. That's a threat, because all the rest of the people in society are living privileged lifestyles based on what they came in here and got as immigrants. Black folk never had those lifestyles. So yes, it's a threat to them.
You have forcefully suggested that that is by design, that where black folks are in America today, and to some extent throughout the diaspora, let's talk about America today, is clearly by design. How do you...
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I hope you're doing fine, Africans, or black people, or whoever is watching. I hope you're doing fine where you are, and if you ain't doing fine, please do fine where you are. So there is a saying that goes, my people perish due to lack of knowledge. Yeah, you perish because you lack knowledge, but a wise person seeks knowledge and seeks understanding. You know, understanding creates awareness, understanding kicks out ignorance. But if we lack ignorance and we lack knowledge, then we are bound, we are bound to fail. Today's world, we have economic struggles, we have political struggles, we have social struggles, and all these may be caused by our ignorance. We might elect people who are not really fit to be in the position of power. We might make some bad economic decisions as black people. And so seeking knowledge is one thing which I think is paramount, and everyone should always work in line to seeking knowledge and seeking understanding, So there is what we call the black dollar in the United States of America. The black dollar refers to money that is owned by the black people, The black dollar is money that is owned by the black people. I repeat, you understand? So we've had inventions that were developed by black people, and these inventions didn't come through as being acknowledged by their creators. They were not acknowledged. Well, okay, let me put it in a simple way. I create something as a black person, but because I like the black dollar, the white dollar comes and takes my inventions and patent it when they patent that invention, it does not belong to me now, it belongs to them legally. And now the whole world will know that white dollar is the one which invented, okay, they have the legal rights to that, you know, they have the legal rights to that invention. This is happening because the black dollar is not working as it should. We lack knowledge of economics. We lack knowledge of bringing our money together and letting our money work for us, not against us. Recently, or rather in the past, I made some videos where a black person was complaining that black people are ruining his business. And he said that he was having a car rental business and black people would rent his cars and return the cars when they were scrapped off. The bumper is torn, scratched paint, maybe the headlights are broken, while the white people would return it in a good position as they found it. What does this tell us about the black people? We really don't care if one of us grows. We want to pull each other down. But this is not a way to develop as black people. If we continue like this, I'm telling you, we are heading nowhere. But we have a good news. There's hope. There's hope because some of us black people have become doctors. Some of us have become professors. Some of us have become people of higher intellect, you know. In this video, we are going to look at a discussion or an interview, if you want to call it so, between Dr. Cloud Anderson, who is known for supporting black money. He's known to supporting black economics. He's going to tell us why the black dollar is important for the black people in the United States of America, for them to protect themselves and guard themselves against the atrocities that is being done to them by the government of the United States of America. Because yes, even the government of the US is always fighting the black person by their constitution. Let's dive into this video. Let's listen to Dr. Cloud Anderson. Let's dive in.
You tell black folk to go out and compete with what? What are they going to compete with? They don't own or control anything. They still only control 1/2 of 1% of anything that value in our society, while they are being burdened down with 6 to 7 times their fair share of everything that's negative. All the social pathology is being inflicted on them. They're the ones that are bearing the burdens of low-income housing, poverty, food stamps, welfare, dysfunctional families, no businesses, no opportunities, failing school systems. They're the ones that's being negatively impacted. Nobody has ever addressed the real issues. The civil rights movement didn't address the issues. They started talking about social integration. Social integration was not the problem with black folk, and even the concept of civil rights. They twisted and corrupted that concept. Civil rights was initially talking about what you're going to do for black folk in the country when it came out in 1865 and 1866 in its first civil rights laws. And what those civil rights laws were trying to address was correct the Dred Scott decision of 1857. And what I mean by that black folk had no rights and they can own and control nothing. And so when you had, and here in Washington, D.C., you had some congressmen called radical Republicans like Congressman Benjamin, Thaddeus, and Charles Sumter and the rest of them. They said this, that the only things that black people can ever be in America, they're either going to be free or they're going to be slaves. Minimally, to be free, they must have 40 acres, a mule, and $100. Now, immediately, Andrew Johnson, who replaced Lincoln when he got assassinated, he vetoed it. Yeah. And after he vetoed it, when the conservatives took over the control of black folk, the Northerners walked away from it, left them, abandoned them. Black folk were forced into Jim Crow, segregation, and peonage. And they corrupted the whole concept of civil rights and made it a civil issue for everybody. Nobody's ever enslaved the gays, the midgets, the humpbacks, women, Asians, Arabs, Hispanic, and American Indians. They enslaved black folk. That's why it's critically important, to go back to one of your earlier questions, for people to understand, when you start talking about issues, about rights, the Dred Scott decision said the black man has no rights. It didn't say the Asian man, the Arab man, the Mexican man, the Indian man. It says the black man. So what's happening now is that the whole concept of civil rights and social integration, all this has been mal-distributed and it's been corrupted into what we call fabricated classes. They're getting all the benefits that black folks should be getting today. All these, and it's intentionally and being designed to make sure everything is moved away from black folk and the lock and the box stays on black folks so they never get out of it.
There are those that would challenge you to say that you discuss about civil rights, because it almost sounds as if you're saying that the struggle of the civil rights movement didn't yield fruit. And one thing that those who challenge you, Lord knows, as we look at the different people who have addressed some of the things that you've said, is that, for example, the civil rights movement in itself is in large part for Barack Obama sitting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue today. Do you discount the importance of him sitting, or is it as important as proponents would say it is that he sits there in the White House?
Oh yeah, it's most definitely important in a social context and in a symbolic concept. Very important, because, and unfortunately, that's what black folk have been fed for 150 years. It's symbolic achievements, symbolic success. Well, you got a black president, you got Martin Luther King Boulevard, you got Rosa Parks Boulevard, but you didn't touch the structural issue. You did not go back and redistribute some of the resources back into the hands of black folks so they can be a competitive group and a self-sufficient, independent group in America. I mean, what are the benefits, direct benefits do black get from having, in terms of rectifying the structural problems, by having Obama in the White House, by having, we got 4 or 5 black billionaires like Oprah, Tiger Woods. How does that translate over to black people? If Oprah and Tiger Woods lost all their money tomorrow, how does that disadvantage black folk? It doesn't hurt black folk one way or the other, because there's no connection between Oprah and Tiger Woods being billionaires and helping all these poor black folk, when 38% of all the black people in America are in the poverty level. Having Obama in the White House, how does that translate to benefits for black folk? You write down on a piece of paper, on one side of paper, all the symbolic issues, then write down how black folk have been benefited. Write down right now what direct, specific sole benefits have gone to black folk by putting Obama in the White House. So that's important.
You mentioned the word redistribute the wealth.
Right.
And we have a clip, I think we have here about you speaking to the issue and on the issue of reparations. Because to some extent, when you say redistribute the wealth, that I think incorporates some form of reparations. Some form of reparations. So we're going to show that clip and we'll discuss it.
You're going to have all kind of black folk in this country going to be opposed to reparation for you. They're going to be jumping out. They're going to be jumping out. They're going to be jumping out of the woodwork. They're going to be jumping out of the woodwork because they're scared to death. They're just as scared now as they were in 1860. They're going to say, we don't have anything, and when we ask for something, they'll take away what we got, and we don't have anything, but they'll take nothing away from us. And so you're going to have that group that's always scared, and they're always going to say, it's better for us to have nothing than you try to get something, because that way they'll take us back to nothing, which is where we are already.
John Conyers, from his perch there at Capitol Hill, on Capitol Hill, started a long time ago, maybe as forcefully as anyone within the political structure, talking about bills for reparation and the need for reparation. And people yawn and almost say, go away, little boy, with that noise. So I want to talk here today about reparations. When you say that blacks deserve reparations, one, tell me what you mean by that, and take your time and give us, to the extent that you can, a blueprint of what reparations would look like if Dr. Anderson were a part of the architecture of that structure.
I would be delighted to. See, well, first, let's start with the basic premise, is that black folk are exceptional people. They're exceptional people, and they have some exceptionality in this country that everybody overlooks. Black folk have not been treated like all the other people coming to this country. Black folk have been disrespected and disenfranchised in everything and excluded out of everything. Now let's talk about it in the context of reparations. See, all the immigrants came into this country. They came here looking for some form of benefits. The entire American dream is structured on coming to America to get two things: free land and free labor. That's the basis of the American dream. And we have an unending influx of immigrants in this country going all the way back to 1790 with the first immigration and naturalization law, which set up a ranking order. It set up a ranking order in skin color, running from white, yellow, brown, black, from the highest to the lowest in terms of color, of skin color. And that was the immigration law that was set up based on that. Every immigrant that came to this country was entitled to benefits, to get unearned benefits in terms of the American dream. Everybody talks about the American dream, but nobody ever defines it for you. And every nation was alerted to the fact that America was now open for immigrants to come in. And every immigrant came to this country through the homesteading and through head rights. They could get free land in whatever quantity they want, they could claim. When Thomas Jefferson came, Thomas Jefferson got over 100,000 free acres of land. Thomas Jefferson and Washington, they all got over 100,000. Patrick Henry got over 65,000 acres of free land. They got free land. And when the big land rush came after the end of the Civil War, and we had 26 million Europeans poured in this country. Then they opened up the Oklahoma Territory. White immigrants picked up over 2 million acres of free land in 24 hours. They didn't pay for it. Now that land has been passed on. Let's use that. All that land, all the resources, the timber, the gold, the silver, the chrome, the bauxite, has multiplied in value and doubled in value to triple in value every 20 years. And it's been passed on through inheritance from one white generation to the next. So consequently, they have control over the land, the resource, and everything has been passed on from generation to generation and shutting black folk out. That's why the average white person now has $3,500 wealth compared to black folks 1.5%.
Okay, let me ask you, because you talk about this land, this land that was originally inhabited. Columbus didn't 1492.
Didn't find it, yeah.
Right. Okay, address, if you would, the role that the U.S. government, see, this wasn't willy-nilly cowboys, you know, running wild. This was a U.S. government and its policies that ultimately bastardized, took away from, stole from the Native Americans, made treaties that ultimately were broken, if you want to say willy-nilly, that's where willy-nilly came in. So if you would address that for a moment.
Well, yes, and see, it started one of the first treaties was the New York Treaty about 1516 that came in. That was one of the first treaties. But in every one of those treaties that they set up with the Indians, they put an inclusion in there saying this, that if you were to cooperate with us and be able to help us maintain the slavery system we set up in this country, you know, and we will reward you and compensate you. We'll give you clothing, we'll give you food, we'll give you weapons, you know, and we'll even call you civilized if you will help us maintain slavery. Every treaty contained a clause to help Indians to shut down black folk. Slavery could never have existed in this country and been maintained without the full participation of the American tribes. That's why they started calling them civilized, Rock, because they began to say, you quit hunting in the woods and running wild and get yourself some land and get yourself some slaves. So Indians became slave hunters, slave traders, and in the final analysis, all civilized tribes, the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians, they all fought with the South to maintain slavery. And so therefore, and they got benefits from it. And that led to, going back to the earlier question you asked me about reparations. And even after the Civil War ended, the Choctaw and Chickasaw were still holding about 12 or 15,000 slaves even after the Civil War ended. The United States government sent in troops saying, you got to get rid of this slavery and set black folk free. And they set up what's called the 1866 Indian Treaties with these 5 civilized tribes, which says that black people in this country must not only turn them loose, they must get benefits. They must get forms of reparations, going back to your earlier question. You must first of all, set them free. 2, you must give them an option, and this is for all black freedmen and all blacks who lived in the Indian Territory and all black Indians. You must set them free, allow them to have membership in the tribe. You must give them, let them have access to all the resources on the reservation. You must let them also be tax exempt. You must let them have free education. You must also let them be able to give them $150 in cash. You must give them 160 acres of land. And in present day times, those black Indians under the 1866 treaty should be getting, they could also hold gambling casinos. Now, this country has never carried out the full mandates, but yet we are still honoring it for Indians. Right now, all the benefits that Indians are getting in this country are getting it from the 1866 Indian Treaty, because they took up arms against the United States in the Civil War. They wiped out all previous treaties. Now, every year in the White House, we get about 560-some white Indian chiefs, which in history they call $5 Indians, because 90% of the people call themselves Indians nowadays are not really Indians. Those are whites passing as Indians, because they paid $5 to the Dawes Commission to get their name on the Dawes roll so they can get all these advantages. But every year they get invited to the White House. And every year they got an approximate $3.5 billion every year, even that Obama's been in office. They got money into the Federal Indian Bureau. Now, see, if you were to talk about reparations, black folks have been getting all this money all these years too. But they got shut out because the Indians in 1938, they sent a letter to the Department of Bureau of Indian Affairs saying, how do we shut black folk down to make sure they never get any reparations? And that letter floated around in the federal government from about 1938 to about 1941. Then it went to the Secretary for the Department of Interior. And the Department of Interior looked and says, aha. Said, how do I come up with a scheme to shut down blacks so they get no reparations in this country? He said, what you do, you Indians come up with a new concept called a quantum blood law, which says that black folk are not entitled to any of the benefits of the 1866 treaties in terms of reparations unless they can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that they got 1/4 Indian blood in them. And we make Indian blood sacred like Jesus Christ's blood. And therefore, they've been shutting blacks out all these years. That's why they didn't get any reparations, to go back to your earlier point. And the last point on reparations, you asked me earlier about a blueprint. This country's always given reparations to all groups except black folk, even though black folk were the ones who built the country. They built the bridges, they picked the cotton, they built the highways, they built the government buildings. They were the backbone of this nation. But now, so in the Marshall Plan, we gave billions of dollars to Germans after World War II. We gave under what's called a Point 4 program. We gave reparations to Japanese. We gave reparations to American Indians. We gave reparations to everybody but black folk. Yet black folk are locked into the bottom of a vertical order and a descending order of wealth, owning, and poverty, and control of resources, and nobody wants to address the issue.
As you articulate your position on reparations, redistribution of wealth, again, those looking in, the pundits, if you will, might say, well, are you, a Bernie Sanders acolyte? Are you socialist? Do you propose practicing socialism when you start talking about redistributing the wealth? My question for you is, what do you think it is that has prevented a groundswell behind something that seems as if is such a logical, practical, and fair idea? Not revolutionary, not radical. When you look at the facts and you look at the history, then it would seem that most fair-minded people might consider this something that they could get behind, put their shoulder to the wheel on. Why do you think there just hasn't been the groundswell even amongst black folks? Most black people don't talk about reparations.
Well, because simply a lot of them don't want to be identified with anything as black. Because right now, see, in this nation, everything that everybody dreams of is identified with and associated with white skin. That means privilege, wealth, power, income, and privileges associated with white skin. Nobody in his right mind will identify with anything black that's negative. If black folk are carrying 6 to 7 times their fair share of everything is bad, why would anybody want to identify with blackness when they can identify with whiteness and get all these advantages? Now, in terms of what they should be doing for that, black folk, for instance, right now, these young black folk that need leadership in these communities, like this thing about Black Lives Matter, they're floundering around because they don't have any black leadership out there. Now, black leaders will say, well, what can we do to help these blacks, give them some leadership, and at the same time give them some mild form of reparation that's not violent, not committing themselves to violence and then to kind of overthrow or revolutionary activities. They should go in all these urban areas. 70% of all the black people in America live in and around 10 large metropolitan areas. Yeah. Why don't you go in and reindustrialize those areas and build industries in there? But what this country should—
What does that mean?
That means that back in the 1960s, when you started the integration process, see, these urban areas didn't deteriorate because of black folk being there. They deteriorated because at that point in time, to avoid integration, the power structure in this country used the 1952 Highway Act to build expressways out of these urban areas and to build what we call suburbs. Suburbs didn't exist. And once they built those suburbs, they then made a commitment to relocate and all the resources out of those cities, to abandon those cities on what we call a burnt field process, which means let's destroy it and let the cities deteriorate. They moved to the suburbs. They moved out the industries, the businesses, the wealth, the power, the banks, everything moved to the suburbs. And they abandoned those cities. That's why those cities deteriorated. You should do just the reverse thing now. Go around and take those big cities like Detroit, Gary, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, where you have heavy concentration of blacks, and you do an industrialization program. What that means, you start awarding incentives. You set up redevelopment banks in those cities, where now the government puts special funds into their revolving loan funds, like at about a 2% interest rate that's revolving and subordinatable to regular loans, where blacks in those cities can start building their own businesses and rebuilding their own communities rather than socially integrating. Stay where you are and build your own communities. And in those communities, started building industries and factories where you can create jobs, an income base, a tax base, wealth base, an employment base, and begin to build functional schools in those communities. And set up these development banks, and the government should put the money into it. Secondly, you should go.
Let me stop you there. And Joe Sixpack, driving into work at one of the factories in Detroit from the suburbs. Where he still lives, Joe Sixpack, the white guy.
Yeah.
He's going to say, well, wait a minute. My tax dollars, in order to do what you're talking about and redistribute some of this wealth, my tax dollars, my hard-earned tax dollars, are going to have to be touched, and I'm not looking to make that happen.
Well, that's good. It should be touched. You know why? He came here. His ancestors came here to get free handouts. That's why they came here. No immigrant spent 3 months crossing perilous oceans to get to the United States looking for happiness. They came here to get handouts, to get free benefits. See, understand this, Rock, and I want your audience to understand it too. 99% of all the black people in America are the direct descendants of slaves, which means they were here before 99% of all the other people arrived. All these people are coming to this country boasting about, my family came from Germany, my parents came from Ireland, my parents came from Greece or Italy. They came here for a specific reason, to get benefits. They get unearned benefits, to profit and enjoy the fruits of black folks' labor and the Indian land. They've already gotten theirs. And now what they're saying is that now that we've gotten everything, we got control of it, we got it free and passed it from generation to next generation, we're not gonna let you have anything. And see, that's grossly unfair and it's immoral. And the worst thing that our society is doing, and they should cease in doing it, is they start equating black folk to all these fabricated groups, like minorities and poor folk and people of color and Asians and Hispanics coming into the country. These people coming to this country today get unearned benefits to enjoy the fruits of black folks' labor. Nobody shut them down. The Chinese started pouring into California after the Civil War to get benefits. And the Mexicans, there were no, in the Civil War, you had about 6,000 Hispanics in the United States. And now you got about almost 50-something million. They came in looking for benefits.
And I heard Jesse Jackson say one day that, you know, all other groups came here seeking a thrill.
That's right. They came.
Black folks came here obviously against their will.
See, and say black folk are the only non-immigrants. Our country is structured on immigrant rights to give them benefits. Black folk are the only non-immigrants in this country. I know people always say, well, Indians are immigrants. Indians were the original people. No, they were not. The original people in this country were black folk. The Folsom people that came in this country about 16,000 years ago. The so-called American Indians are Asians that came across the Bering Straits about 6,000 years ago. So what I'm saying is that everybody comes to this country to get benefits except black folk. Nobody wants to stick up for and fight for black folks. Say you cannot solve the racial problem in this country unless you create a circumstance where black folk can acquire some wealth, power, decent communities, functional schools, and be able to take care of their own people and be self-supported and competitive and independent.
Malcolm X was quoted as saying, and I don't know if my quote will be exact, but something to the effect of, to allow your oppressor to educate your children is to be a fool. Talk to me about, in all of your study and scholarship and research, the role that education has played in depriving, enhancing and or depriving the pursuit of happiness of black individuals.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. See, and the education system as we presently know it, Rock, came into existence. It didn't even exist until after slavery. The present system came into existence, and one of the primary reasons it came into existence was to educate the offsprings of slaves, to be able to give them an educational opportunity. And they structured it so that basically that it would be, even though it would be a manual education, you know, manual art training, but it did come into existence. And to a large degree, black folk contributed to the development of those school systems. They worked hard to build those schools, selling flowers, pies, cooks, and cakes, and building with their own hand. And that was like in 1866. In 1866, keep in mind that up until that point, we had laws in this country that forbade the educating of a black person.
Yeah.
You get caught teaching a black person to read and write would cost you $100 and 39 lashes with a whip to be caught teaching a black person to read and write. Black folk were suffering from imposed ignorance. They were being mandated to be ignorant, and if they weren't physically or in fact ignorant, they had to act and pretend they were dumb. They had to dumb down.
Right.
But between 1866 and let's say 1896, in that 30-year period, even though 96% of the black folk could not read and write in 1866, in a 30-year time period, those black folk almost by themselves educated, reduced their illiteracy rate in this country from 96% down to about 44%. Nobody has ever done that in the history of this world. No group that had been enslaved for 300 or 400 years could in 30-year time period set a record for educational achievement. Now, and they did it. So but then let's jump and show how that worked though. By 1950, a black person with an education was still not getting the benefits of having an education. Education usually has benefits that follows it based on the achievement levels of a group of people. Achievement benefits never followed black folk in education. So in 1950, the average black person with a college education could not earn as much as a white high school dropout because they were not getting the benefits of having an education. And what you have to do nowadays is go back in those, when I say you go back in these urban areas where all these black folk are, you got to rewrite the curriculum. You cannot have a curriculum that is designed to educate white children and all these other groups who've not been oppressed, denied, and rendered dysfunctional. You cannot use the same curriculum on them. You need to shut down all these schools in these urban areas. Shut them down, close them down, and say, now we're going to rewrite the curriculum based on the needs of black children.
Okay. You say shut them down, close them down.
Right.
And any administrator, Kaya Henderson, who's superintendent of school, chancellor of schools here, and anybody else would say, that's so impractical. That would destroy our children.
No, I mean, that wouldn't. Now, I don't know about Henderson. I was over education for the state of Florida. I'm the only black person in America that was over the entire education system for 7 to 8 years for the whole state of Florida. I was over everything from the first grade of the nursery school all the way to the universities in both the public sector and the private sector. You got to be realistic. Black kids need a special kind of education. We are the only people on this earth that, for instance, have never enjoyed the fruits of an industrial revolution. Everybody's done it. We have never had those kind of values, those kind of experiences. You got to go in there and say, now, what are the things that black children need? They need things that are different from the white child. They come to school with different emotional, physical, and financial baggage than the regular kids do. You got to modify your curriculum based on the needs of black folk in this country. There's an example. Supposing right now I was to tell you that we all now, that the world's coming to the end, we got to go to the moon. What you should do is say, now, how does that impact your school and your curriculum? You have to, we need to go into our schools and shut down our curriculum and begin to teach our kids how to survive on the moon. What kind of expertise and training would they need? We're going to need pilots, we're going to need astronauts, we need chemists, we need biologists, we need people in physics, physical science. You need to rewrite the curriculum so they include all these things to help elevate black folk up so they can be a competitive group along with all the other people. The other kids that are coming to the school system, they come from families and from cultures that have already enculturate certain kind of values, skills, and amenities into their lifestyle. We never had that. You got to bring those black kids up and make schools worthwhile. Right now, most of the schools like in Detroit, Michigan, they are dysfunctional. Half the black kids that graduate from high school can't read and write. Why do you keep passing these kids through school talking about, well, we ain't gonna shut the schools down? Shut them down and restructure them. Now, that's what I recommended. But here's what's happening in Florida. When in Florida doing the integration, here comes whites now and say, well, Dr. Anderson, what we're gonna do with these schools, we're not gonna integrate our schools. What we're gonna do is create charter schools. We're gonna shut your schools down, but we're gonna create charter schools to replace the public schools. We're gonna set up segregated academies. We're gonna set up religious schools and shut your schools down because we're gonna make sure our kids get what white kids need in the South. And so the same thing, black kids, these black teachers and principals say, we're gonna close our schools for a month or whatever time it takes, or during the course from June until September, say, let's rewrite the curriculums and started providing these kids with some education that'll qualify them to do what? To make sure that they never graduate from school without either a scheme in their head or a skill in their hands. Every black child should be taught economics and basic training and business development from the 1st grade to the 8th grade. And by the time he gets to the 8th grade, he should learn he should be stimulated to be able to learn how to create things, to modify things, to produce things. When he gets to high school, he should at least be taught some basic skills, at least 2 years of skill training. Like it used to be. Why aren't they graduating being plumbers, electricians, tool and die makers, or sheet metal, woodwork, carpentry? Right now, if you go call Sears out to your home, most of the people coming now doing all that basic work are not black folk. They are immigrants coming into your house doing the work for plumbing and electric work and woodwork and bricklaying. Look at the construction companies. Blacks used to have that. You got to make sure these black kids do not graduate from high school ill-equipped to compete. Quit sending so many black kids to college. You don't need all them black kids in college. Black kids now graduate with a master's degree working in McDonald's and Wendy's stores because they master nothing. Yeah. Quit getting black folks master's degrees with masters so they can't master anything.
Let me ask you about people know you. There are videos of you with thousands and thousands of people, you know, eyeballs on your videos.
I didn't know that. That's
paying attention to what Dr. Anderson has to say. You know, theorizing, making very strong suggestions, advocating, you know, black empowerment. What didn't come across so much in the public domain was the businesses that you operate. One, tell us about what you're doing in the world of business and how what you're doing in the world of business gives backbone to the things you're saying. So how are you practicing what you preach?
Well, now, because I'm spending most of my time being a speaker, going around the country, and most of the resources from those engagements go to the Powernomics Corporation, which I don't own now. My wife owns that. That's her company, the Powernomics Corporation. But in the course of my life, I've been to the highest levels of government. At every level, I run campaigns for presidents, for governors, for mayors, for congressional people. I didn't in the campaigns. I was a campaign manager for them. Okay, I've been in all levels of education, from everything from special education to elementary schools to university, community college. I've been at the highest level of everything you can think about.
And I heard you talking earlier about the fish business.
Yeah. Well, let me get to that one. Now, in terms of business, first thing I built a radio station, WWD in Tallahassee, Florida. I built that. That was one of the first FM stations in the country for black folk. I think it was about the second or third with James Brown and myself. I also owned a radio station in the top of the Superdome in New Orleans. I owned radio stations.
And that was what period of time?
That was back in the 70s.
Okay. And in the 70s, you also you were in the administration of the peanut farmer from Georgia.
Yeah, from Georgia.
What role was that?
Well, I was a campaign manager in Florida for Jimmy Carter.
Okay.
Jimmy Carter had been in 2 primaries earlier in the campaign season, and he had lost in both of those campaigns. And then he was on the wing. And at that point in time, people like Andy Young, Julian Bond, and some other people in high levels of his campaign in Atlanta, they called me and said, Dr. Anderson, the next campaign, the primary will be in Florida. And I organized the blacks in the state of Florida on what's called the State Action Council to empower them. And we were very strong then because we were united, played as a team. We voted as a block on issues. We moved as a block. We lobbied as a block.
Okay. So let me, because I did want to get in that you were a part of that.
Well, he pointed me to be the first assistant secretary in commerce as a black secretary. I was the only black that got appointed to be a chairman for economic development for eastern and southern governors. Most people don't know that. No black has ever been a chairman for governors. They appointed me over that. Okay. So plus I had trade missions in third world countries, including Africa, Venezuela, Colombia, and all around the world.
And back to your business. We started to talk about the fish business. Tell us about that. How did you get into that?
Well, we're heading up trade missions in different countries. The classical seafood industry came to me and said, Dr. Anderson, we're getting killed off. At that time, they set up what's called a Kobe plan, where we went over into China, Kobe, Japan, and we're trying to figure out how to help some of these third world nations. And we encourage aquaculture, to start raising fish in those countries. But those people within a short period of time got very good at it because they didn't have a labor cost and a food cost because they weren't feeding their fish the appropriate diets that they needed to be clean and harmonious. And so it was killing off our classical seafood industry. So I went and set up several programs to try to help our local seafood industry. I set up what's called the John Island crabbing facility for blacks in John Islands. I set up the Hilton Head Seafood Corp. I started what's called a Midwest Seafood Distribution Program. And I was taking surplus, I had the surplus fishing program. I was taking fish to third world countries, particularly Africa, to give it to them. But then I said, in my basic principles of Powernomics, I said black folks should dominate in business wherever they dominate in population or in spending patterns. And since black folk eat 3 to 4 times more fish than anyone else in the country at that time, and we spend $9 for every $1 white spend, then blacks should be dominating in seafood production. In other words, from the boat to the throat, they should be controlling the seafood industry. So I decided to open up an aquaculture facility here in the Washington, D.C. area. And we set it up, and we operated for about 6 or 7 years. But the problem was most of my clients were Asians. Almost 99 and 99% were Asian. No blacks ever got into the vertical integration. I wanted blacks to not only learn how to produce, but to retail, wholesale, all the way up.
So your business, you're sort of manufacturer almost, if you will.
I'm a manufacturer of fish.
And what you were looking to do was to be able to have other blacks to be introduced in that ladder, as you say, wholesalers, retailers, whatever they might have been.
Right.
And that never happened.
Never happened.
And why?
I'm not sure. I guess some because they didn't have the money. I'm not sure why, but we just waited for them and waited for them, and I became totally dependent on Asians to buy all of our product. And so Asians began to start taking over. Then they started dominating the seafood industry. Right now they dominate it because they play as a team.
I was going to say, which seems as if that would be a classic economic example that even if you are the manufacturer, if those that are practicing group economics can ultimately, if they are continually and majority the ones that purchase from you, they ultimately can sort of take your place, can take your position, which speaks to ultimately the lack of cohesiveness and working together within the black community.
Right, and that's why, going back to an earlier point I made, if we had gone to these urban areas, for instance, and I told you about industrializing these urban areas, you could have set up distributorships and wholesalers in those areas. Those people could have gone down and borrowed low-interest funds and built wholesaling and warehousing of seafood, and then all the way up to the retail level where they have a chain of black restaurants. And that's why I talked to like Clarence Otis, who was our head of Red Lobster at that time. And I wanted to be able to put blacks in a position where they could buy a lot of these Red Lobster restaurants that were getting ready to close down. And instead of having Red Lobster restaurants, they could have had Black Lobster restaurants all over the country. But unfortunately, we weren't able to do it because Clarence Otis, he resigned from as the head of the Darden restaurant chain. But black folks should be heavily engaged because they're the major eaters of seafood. You go to any seafood restaurant, a large, significant number of people are going to be black folk.
Definitely.
But unfortunately, now Asians are pretty much locked down the seafood industry in this country now. I was the only one that was out there doing it in a significant degree. But again, I could not set up the distributorship that I wanted in warehousing, wholesaling, and retailing across the country for black folk.
Okay. You know, we've spent a lot of time talking about what are the maladies, what is the plight, sort of the bad condition of blacks being on the lowest rung of the economic ladder. For someone who has been addressing these issues for as long as you have, can we talk about the possibility of some solutions? I mean, I saw a speech of yours where you hit the bell and said that blacks in America are at serious risk of seriously becoming an underclass.
Well, now they are official, as of 2013, they are an underclass now. And you've been supplanted and displaced by what we call fabrication of classes across the country. The emphasis now is on those new fabricated classes. And that came out of the benign neglect policy that was put in place by Richard Nixon back in 1969, 1970. And benign neglect said this: the way you shut down the black civil rights movement in this country and the black power movement in this country is to take the focus off of black folk and put it on minority, women, children, and immigrants. And when they did that, it means make black folk become invisible. Do not exclude black from any public policies. And over the last 50 years, since the 1960s, it is now morphed in what they call political correctness. Political correctness means do not address anything pertaining to black folk, do not include black folk in anything, and at best you can do is put them in some very broad, ambiguous category that nobody can
Classic
determine.
example of that was the fine line that Obama had to walk, not putting an emphasis, perhaps in a public way, unable to put as much emphasis as maybe someone before him or someone that might come after him that is not black.
That's right. He's prohibited from addressing the issues of his own people. He can't do it. They got him blocked and blocked. He can't address his own people, and that creates despair in the black folk, because black folk, after Jim Crow segregation died, they were looking forward to social integration as being the rainbow, the golden goose, you know, the pot of gold. And then they looked for symbolically, then they looked for another symbol, which would be have a black man in the White House or a black man in the Supreme Court. But all these individuals have been unable to be able to address significantly the issues of black folk. What I told you is the maldistribution of wealth and resources and controls of things in the country. Black folk are non-competitive. They can't compete. Right here, you're in Washington, D.C., in Chocolate City. All these cities are going to be gentrified. All these major urbans that I'm telling you about, these big cities, they're going to be gentrified. And they're going to be, here's a scene that they're going to use 6 schemes to wipe black folk out. One's going to be called gentrification, which means come in there and dilute black folk down. When I came here to Washington, black folk were about 78% of the population. You're down to about 40% now. The second thing is privatization. You're going to take all the public resources and put them in the hands of the white dominant society. They're going to buy, they got the wealth, the money. They can buy as much as they want. That's why when in 1996, when Clinton lifted the Tail Cap Act in communication, saying that anybody can own as many radio stations and television stations that they want based on their money. If you know that whites own and control 99.5% of all the wealth, why would you say that, knowing that black folk can't outcompete them in buying up the media in this country? So out of 12,000 radio stations, blacks used to have about 100 something, down to about 70, 80 now. And out of 12,000 in cable systems, 5,000, blacks don't own any. In daily newspapers, blacks don't own any. In television, blacks might have 1 out of 5,000. You don't have the wealth to be a competitive people because nobody wants to address your issue and get back and figure out how do we go back and redevelop this country so that black folk can have decent communities, and in those communities they can have an economic base, they can have a tax base, they can produce jobs for their own people. So rather than having our schools training black folk to go look for jobs, they should be training black folk how to create jobs for their own people in their own communities and have through functional schools.
Now, again, having, you know, a good amount of time to look at your books here. As I had said earlier, we've spent a good amount of time talking about the condition of the patient, of the black patient. Several people who endorsed your book basically endorsed it, and in different ways they said the same thing. And I'll read Congressman Clay's, a member of Congress, who said, Dr. Anderson methodically outlines and articulates strategies for blacks to become a self-empowered people in America despite the obvious injustice imposed on them throughout much of their history in this country. This was 20 years ago. And in the 5 minutes that we have left, I'd like to see if we could spend some time talking about where there is hope and what can be done to change this dire situation, and it is dire.
It is a dire situation, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have to have a new mindset with our people to understand that nobody's going to come rescue black folk, and quit depending on other people to ally with you. We're the only people that want to go to the bathroom but want everybody to go to the bathroom with us. See, and that's a problem. We don't have enough confidence in ourselves to be a competitive people. And so once we get this new mindset, then we have to say there's nothing wrong with having we got to build black communities. Rock, it is impossible in theory and in practice for you to be a competitive group of people in a capitalist society without having either a physical community or a broad sense of a community that you can identify with your people if you don't live together. We have neither physical communities anymore, neither we have a sense of community. Everybody in every immigrant group coming to this country, within a matter of a few days to a month after they land here, they will build a physical community. They'll have Japan towns, Chinatown, French town, German town, Greek town, Pole town, hockey town, cork towns, Mexican towns.
Something occurs to me in line with what you're saying. Statistically, we are somewhere 12% of the population. And you say 1/2 of 1% of the wealth.
That's right.
And if the black community.
Now, after carefully listening to Dr. Cloud Anderson and the interviewer, the white man, I can say the white man is fair in his questions, but some questions were quite, triggering. The questions about slavery, those are quite very much traumatizing, as particularly to a black American. Another thing is this. It is believed and it is said that black people were responsible for selling out the black Americans into slavery. It is said that very many times, But I think it's a colonialist lie, it's a colonialist propaganda that it is the black person who sold out fellow black people into slavery. And why am I saying this, and why or how is it related to the video we've just watched right now? You see, I believe that you've seen those videos right now where people are comparing Africans to African Americans, or rather the black Americans, if you like. People are saying that the Africans do not like each other with the black Americans. Perhaps the main reason they say this is because of the colonialist lie, the lie that was created so as to ensure that the bond, the reunification, and the togetherness is not achieved. You understand? This might be an agenda by the white colonialist to ensure that the black person in America would never know peace with one another. And so tell me, would you invest your money to someone whom you don't trust? Would you invest your money to someone whom you think sold you out? Or rather, you who is an African and is going over there in the United States of America to invest, because it is not only that black Americans are coming to Africa to invest. We also have, I believe, Africans who go over there and invest. We have Africans who have done a lot of real estate in the United States of America, So having this colonial mindset that was created by the colonialist and the slave master is something that's there to ensure that black money does not help the black community. Black people should study economics, because it is here in economics where we are beaten so hard, It is never equal chance. It is never equal for a black child and a white child. As they grow up, they don't have equal opportunity growing up in the USA. No, it's a lie if someone told you they have. In the papers, they might say, but in practicality, in the society, it doesn't happen. It is important to have the black money to ensure that black progress is achieved, because black people have invented so many things, as I told you before. Black people have come up with complex theorems, and because we lack black money to fund and to make these things massive in production, we hear nothing of these black inventors. We have black artists like Akon. We have black musicians, we have black architects, we have black doctors, we have all these people. We have talent as black people, but we lack the money to support us. Some of us have money, but we choose not to invest on our own. We must invent our own. You see, 50 Cent, the rapper, I believe you know him. One time he was speaking and he was saying that he cannot go and buy shoes at Nike. He cannot go and buy shoes at Puma, Adidas. Think of all those, Louis Vuitton, those brands, He says that these brands steal black money. He won't do that. He'll just go to China or any other shop and buy ordinary shoes and wear. The leg does not choose which shoes to wear. As long as it fits you, the leg is okay. So the black person has always been putting money in such kind of nonsense expenses. so as to prove something to themselves. The money that you would use to build a school, the money that you would use to build a hospital, the money that you would use to educate yourself, we put that money in those huge bling bling, those things you put on your ears and your nose. You don't have to do those things. You don't have to do, because they are really expensive. Some people go to the extent of placing gold, real gold and diamond, piercing the teeth and all that. But black people are suffering here. I don't find any logical sense why someone would do such a thing, unless you have a self-esteem issue that you really don't know you have. So you having these things is trying to silence something in you. You're trying to silence some kind of, I don't know, weakness. So this is one of the pitfalls that black people fall into. Because Warren Buffett, one of the richest people in the world, once said, if you start buying the things you don't need, you will start selling the things you need. Yeah? Yeah. You know? So we should come together, work together, study economics. Cloud Anderson has been able to make it clear, make it understandable. You know? There's a certain part here that got me really interested. I want us to revisit it again.
Right. And see, black folk are still under the impact of 360 years of slavery, another 100 years of Jim Crow semi-slavery.
I didn't hear the first part you said.
That they're still being burdened, they're overburdened by slavery, because no one has addressed the negative impact of slavery on black folk. It's never been addressed. Because what was the purpose of slavery? The purpose of slavery was to systematically, socially engineer black folk into the lowest level of a real-life monopoly game that was based on wealth, power, and control, what you own and control. And slavery itself then maldistributed almost 100% of all this nation's wealth, power, resource, privileges, and controls of all levels of government into the hands of the dominant white society. And black folk don't have enough resources to be a competitive group. When black folk came out of slavery, let's say before they even went into slavery, they owned and controlled nothing. When they came out in the 1860s, a few blacks, about 250,000 black folk, had successfully acquired 1/2 of 1% of this nation's wealth. And that was in 1860, Rock. Here you are 150 years later, black folks still own and control 1/2 of 1% of this nation's wealth. And it's wealth that controls what you get, what your opportunity is going to be. And that 1/2 of 1%, what does it equate to today? That means that the typical white person right now has 3,500 times more wealth than black folk. And when you tell black folk to go out and compete with what? What are they going to compete with? They don't own and control anything. They still own and control 1/2 of 1% of anything that of value in our society, while they're being burdened down with 6 to 7 times of their fair share of everything that's negative. All the social pathology is being inflicted on them. They're the ones that are bearing the burdens of low-income housing, poverty, food stamps, welfare, dysfunctional families, no businesses, no opportunities, failing school systems. They're the ones that's being negatively impacted.
Wow. After revisiting this part, you can see how much slavery impacted the black economics. You know, black people own half of the 1% of the United States economics or economy. Just listen to that. You see, one of the things which Nelson Mandela said is that education is the tool you can use to change the world. You know, if black people invest in education, if black people invest in knowledge, in wisdom, in understanding, by educating themselves in higher learning institutes, then we would see a change in this half of 1%. We would see an increase of black billionaires. We would see an increase of black dollars. We would see more Oprah Winfrey's. We would see more Tyler Perry's. We would see more Akon, the musician. We would see more of Michael B. Jordan. We would see more of Michael Jordan. We would see more of Michael Jackson. We would see more of these actors, you know. The thing which happens here is togetherness. Togetherness is the key. After learning all this, We should come together, work together, and bring our mind together and realize who the real enemy is. The real enemy is the society, which the society and the government constitution, the constitution of the United States of America in this case, is the enemy. Let me put it point blank, you know, so that you don't misunderstand me. That is the real enemy. We point out, here is where we want correction. We point out, we elect more black leaders. We put more black people into police departments. We put more black people in hospitals. We put more black people in the military. And I'm telling you, black people, we would see more of a change. Slavery happened here, but it was fate. You know, when fate throws you a lemon, don't cry. Take the lemon and squeeze it. When you squeeze that lemon, there's a juice that comes out. You can create lemonade from that juice, you know. I believe that what Dr. Cloud Anderson has said about black economics is vital. And what we lack as black people is knowledge and understanding. We get this by educating ourselves. Yeah. This is EFK original documentaries. And if you're a black person planning to come to Africa, invest on your fellow black people and also help your fellow black Americans in the USA. This is EFK original documentaries. If you like what I do, you know what to do. Support me on Patreon, become a paid member. Kindly, kindly, kindly. It really helps me help you as well. Yeah. See you in the next one, and thank you for my channel membership. I love you guys.